everyone, I'm Jessica Stutzman and welcome back to the Millcreek Government Channel. Plastic is the most prevalent type of marine debris found in our ocean and Great Lakes. Plastic debris can come in all shapes and sizes, but those very tiny pieces of plastics are called microplastics. As an emerging field of study, not a lot is known about microplastics and their impacts just yet. Today, we have Dr. Sherry Mason, Sustainability Coordinator for Penn State Barron, with us to shed some light on her research regarding this very important environmental topic of concern. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and feel free to call me Sam.
Thank you. Sam, again, we're glad to have you in the studio. I have heard a lot of others in the environmental community say that they're so excited to have you here in town at Penn State because you are the expert on freshwater microplastics. So I want to give you that title. And again, you've done a lot of research on this topic, so I want to thank you for being here and sharing your knowledge with us. So I mentioned a little bit about what microplastics were in my intro, but what is the definition to you and where is it found?
So by definition, a microplastic is any piece of plastic that's smaller than 5 millimeters. And I know that that's a weird unit. It's a metric unit, and we're in America. But basically, look at your thumbnail, and anything that is that size or smaller is a microplastic. So they're actually, the larger microplastics, you can actually see them. But they definitely get into a size range that is difficult, impossible to see without a microscope.
Okay, and where are they found? Again, typically I think of, our bodies of water and then maybe some marine mammals ingesting them. Are they in other places?
Oh, they're everywhere. They're in the air we breathe. They're in our water. They're in our soil. They're in organisms, yeah. They're kind of just everywhere. They've become omnipresent, if you will. Some microplastics are created as microplastics, and so probably the best known in that category are the microbeads that used to be included in personal care products like face wash, body wash, toothpaste. So those were intentionally created to be micro-sized. Most microplastics come from the breakdown of something that's bigger. And so, go down any street and you look along the sides and you have pens and bottle caps and water bottles and all sorts of things, and as cars drive over them they break them into small pieces, and those would be considered microplastics. They go down the storm drain and we end up pulling them out of rivers, out of lakes, out of fish, everything.
Okay, and that is actually my first experience with microplastics, microbeads as well, because again, I'm very conscientious of the topic, and I remember seeing, I don't know if it was an article or a news story, and it said if you see, and there's a very scientific term for plastic polypropylene or things like that, listed in your ingredients on the back of your shampoo or your soap bottle, and I thought, well, that's not what I'm using. That can't be what I'm using. So of course I turn it over and I look in the ingredients, and I see the plastic. So that was it for that particular brand of personal care product. Yeah. And I think now instead, and it's an exfoliant, but I think they are crushed peach pits. I think is the idea now.
Apricot scrub.
Yes.
Actually, it's crushed walnut shells.
Okay.
But despite the name, I know because it's called apricot scrub, but they use like apricot extracts for something else. But
exactly.
It's crushed up walnut shells.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I use too.
Exactly. So there we go. So we just made a little change.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want my money to support that product that does use the microbeads. So just curious, if plastics end up in Lake Erie and they're microplastics, can they make their way to the ocean then?
Oh, absolutely. We are all connected through the water that we drink, right? I think we all remember in grade school learning about the hydrologic cycle, right? So water goes up into the clouds and then it rains down and then it moves. And, it's really quite beautiful to look at the landscape from like a satellite image, right? And you see basically the veins of rivers that lead into a body of water like the Great Lakes and how those flow into the oceans. And it connects, we're all connected. So what we do here affects the oceans, and what happens in other communities around the globe affects what we find here. It's a huge connection. But case we do not know, our Great Lakes, right? It starts up in Lake Superior, flows into Lake Huron. Lake Huron and Lake Michigan are connected, so the water exchanges between those two. And in fact, from a geologic standpoint, they're one lake. You just have the state of Michigan that's in the middle of them, like a peninsula sticking out. The water from Lake Huron flows into Lake Erie, which flows into Lake Ontario, and that goes out the St. Lawrence River to the North Atlantic Ocean. So yes, most definitely what we find in the lake here flows into the North Atlantic Ocean.
Okay. And again, most recently, somebody did tell me that we find microplastics in air, and I had a hard time wrapping my head around that. Can you explain how microplastics are found in air?
Sure. I mean, we all know that when we put our clothes in a dryer, right? You pull out a lint screen, and what is lint, right? Lint is little microfibers that come off of our clothes when we wash them. This happens in a washing machine as well as in the dryer. We're just more familiar with it in a dryer. We also, if you're a homeowner, you know that you're supposed to clean out that entire pipe that goes from your dryer out to the outside because lint ends up in that entire pipe. So even though we have a lint filter, it's not filtering everything, right? And so you have lint kind of these microfibers being released every time we're drying our clothes. Well, it gets released to what? It gets released to the air, and so they get flying away in that way. And when we manufacture clothes, the same thing, or when we line dry, right? And so it's just kind of the production and use of synthetic materials that leads to these fibers in the air.
Right, because our clothes are not made out of 100% cotton,
Definitely
all of
not.
the time. So that's where this is coming from.
I'm actually sitting in front of you wearing a synthetic shirt. It's one of my favorite shirts,
Yes.
and I've had it for a very long time. But it's synthetic, that's the reality. In fact, look, plastic is a very insulatory material. Most of our, if not all of our camping equipment nowadays, right? I mean, I remember growing up and camping with my dad, and the tent was huge and it was heavy. And now, you have tents that are in like a compartment this small, and they're incredibly light. And what's that transition? We've gone from using canvas to using synthetics. It's made things much smaller, much lighter weight, much more durable, and much more insulatory, and so it is a really nice material from that standpoint, and that's why you see it, you don't have to iron. That's why I like synthetics.
Me too.
I hate ironing.
Right. Me too. That is just one less step I have to take in the morning. So, okay, so we know what microplastics are. We know where they're found, but why are they harmful to humans and to wildlife?
Why are they harmful? Well, okay, there's a few different kind of aspects to this. The microplastics themselves could be harmful. We don't really have a lot of information there that we know of. What I think of when I think of the plastics is the fact that they are really insulatory. So I imagine if they were to get in between like the synapses, that they could block electrical pulses, which could cause all sorts of issues. But we don't really have a lot of information there. What we have more information on is chemicals. So there are chemicals that are included in plastics when they're manufactured. These are things like plasticizers and UV stabilizers and colorants and flame retardants. And in addition, when plastic is in the environment, it provides a really nice surface for other chemicals to absorb onto. And these are things like polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, which were used as industrial insulators, banned in the 1970s because of their known human health impact, but they're so persistent in the environment that you still find them in the Great Lakes. Okay. Polyaromatic hydrocarbons, a group of compounds that are known to be carcinogens. They were actually the first group of compounds that were identified as carcinogenic, produced in combustion processes like power plants, released into the air, but they come down and they end up in bodies of water like the Great Lakes. And so you have these chemicals that are in the external environment that'll stick to the plastic, and you have chemicals that are in the plastic from the time that basically the plastic is born. And these chemicals we know have human health impacts. I already mentioned the fact that we know that some of them are carcinogenic. Many of them are endocrine disruptors. That means that they mimic the hormones of the body. And hormones are the chemical messengers of the body. So they help communicate, right, send information from your brain, your CPU, down to your fingers and your toes and everything in between. They help to make that communication happen. And so when you start messing with the hormones it has dramatic impacts upon people, and pretty wide-ranging impacts.
I thought, and again, I definitely understood, that this could cause cancer, if you ingest, microbeads of plastic. But I think obesity was the one that shocked me the most when I was reading. Because, again, I guess I expected cancer to be listed as a side effect.
Everything causes cancer.
Exactly.
Right?
But obesity was not one that I expected. And personally, I want, to lead a cleaner, greener life for myself because of my daughter and my family. So I guess my question to you is, where does your passion come from?
Oh, my passion comes from that same thing. I was about 10 years old when it first occurred to me that humans could be doing something as a way of how we live our lives that could be affecting the ability of other species to live theirs. Mm-hmm. And that to me was just wrong. Like, what I'm doing shouldn't keep a fish from being able to live, or a tree, or, a squirrel for that matter, I don't think that my habits and my life should be negatively impacting that. And for future generations, now I have a daughter, and I worry about her and the planet that we're leaving her. And the ability of future generations, even beyond us, to survive. Mm-hmm. And that's really, it's not a happy thing to talk about, but it is the reality of where we are at as a society, as a species living on this planet. 97% of species on this planet have gone extinct. Mm-hmm. We are the exception currently to that, not the norm. And sadly, that we seem to be creating a society, building it up over time that is impeding in our own ability to survive as a species. Mm-hmm. It's like we're working ourselves into extinction. Mm-hmm. I don't want that to be the case. And so trying to educate people for sustainability, because right now our society is terribly unsustainable, right? Mm-hmm. And ultimately, this as a mother, right? If you've watched a child develop, you know that they learn through watching us, mm-hmm. right? That's just the realities. They pick up our good traits. Unfortunately, they pick up some of the bad ones too, right? And we're like, oh, don't do that. That was a bad thing. I don't want you to have that. But that's how we learn. And so, the reality is then, because we learn so much by kind of monkey see, monkey do, and our society is unsustainable, then all we're doing is perpetuating that unsustainability. So my role at Barron, what I'm really looking to do is kind of educate for sustainability, trying to educate the coming generations so that they have an example of what sustainable looks like, since they have so many examples of what is unsustainable, mm-hmm. right? If you're going to switch that mindset, you have to show them that there are other ways. And so that's kind of where my passion is and what I'm doing, I guess.
Yes, and I also read a story online that you spent some time on the Brig Niagara, and that provided some clarity as well on the situation.
My work actually started on the Niagara, and they are my first love. There will never be a sailboat, a sailing vessel, not a boat. They're a ship, tall ship. There will never be a sailing vessel that has my heart the way that the Niagara does. So, it all started there. I hopped aboard the Niagara back in 2011 to help co-teach an environmental science course, a 3-week course aboard the Niagara. And I came on board as an atmospheric chemist. So I was studying what was in the air, and after spending, a week on board, and I was looking at the water, and I thought, everything we know about plastic pollution in the world's oceans, I wonder if there's plastic in the Great Lakes. And it was supposed to be like a fun little side project, but the second we brought in our first sample in 2012, right? So the next year, we decided that we would, as part of the course, we would look for plastic in the Great Lakes. And we brought in that first sample, and I was hooked. I had so many questions that flooded into my mind, and you know, that's how science is. That's what it is, right? It starts with a question, and then you create you know, experiments that help you investigate that. And so it just became an obsession for me. And by the end of that 3-week excursion in 2012, I was like, I'm done being an atmospheric chemist. I am now a plastic pollution researcher, and the rest, as they say, is history.
It's such an amazing story. And so, again, I want to ask, what did you find? What was your research? I know you've published a lot of materials.
Yeah. Well, so what did we find? We found plastic. Ultimately. So it started, you know, in 2012. We looked in Lake Superior, Lake Huron, and then Lake Erie. And then the next year we went into Lake Michigan, did some more work in Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. So we've, you know, over a course of 3 years, we surveyed all 5 of the Great Lakes, and found, you know, basically Lake Erie and Lake Ontario are as polluted as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch that people have heard so much about, right? So if you've ever heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, just know, don't worry, it's not so far away. You just go out to the lake.
And that was one of my questions I was going to ask you was, is that real?
The Great Pacific Garbage Patch? Oh yeah, it is real. It's just not the way I think that a lot of people think it's described. Like, it's been described as this island of floating debris.
Right.
I mean, it'd be really nice if it was an island of floating debris, because then we could just go and scoop it out, and, you know, that would be nice. But if you go to the middle of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, you know what you're going to find? Water. You know, just like if you go out to the lake and, you know, after listening to this interview, you go, oh, I'm going to go look to see if that Dr. Mason is pulling my leg. You go out to the lake and you look in the water and you say, I don't see any plastic. She's just crazy. You don't see it because it's really small particles, and it's diffuse through the water. It's not just sitting on the top like a you know, plastic bottle or something would. I mean, some of those exist. We've pulled bags and balloons out of the Great Lakes, unfortunately. But the vast majority of what we're picking out is incredibly small, and it's, you know, kind of floating right below the surface, and you don't see it. But it's very much there. So we went from looking at the lakes, we've looked at rivers, tributaries to the Great Lakes, we've looked in fish, we've demonstrated that microplastics make their way through wastewater treatment plants, so that was another study. What else have we've done a lot.
And so, and again, back to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, that's why it's so difficult to clean. You can't just take, you know, a net or a boom and get it out of the water. It's very difficult to get it out. And I know that there has been, you know, a recent
ocean cleanup.
Yes.
Yeah, the ocean cleanup. What I you know, I'm not against trying to clean it up, but what I try and remind people, if you were to go home today and find that you had left your kitchen faucet going, and there was something clogging the sink, and there was water pouring out all over your brand new floor. It was going into the carpet. No! You know, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to turn off the tap. You're not going to start trying to clean it up, because you don't clean up when there's still water pouring out. And it's the same idea here. If we keep the flood of plastic, right? And it's not just that we're using and what we have. No, we're building it out. That's what's happening in Beaver County, Pennsylvania, right? We're building out to produce even more plastic than what we have already. Actually, in fact, the plastic industry wants to quadruple plastic production by 2030. So just over 10 years, they want to take what we're already making times 4. So it's a huge build out. So not only are we not turning off the faucet, we're turning it up higher. And then we have people out there trying to clean it up. And that's, It's all well and good, but you got to turn off the tap if you're really going to solve this problem. What the ocean cleanup is focused on is, because of the nature of the realities, they're focused on big stuff because you can't clean up all of the small pieces of plastic that are the same size as, planktonic organisms. You're going to end up killing the very ecosystem that you're trying to save. So they're focused on big things, and that's something. The big things do become small things, but it's not going to solve the problem. And that's what worries me when people hear about, some of these cleanup projects is, like the one for ocean where you can buy a bracelet, which for the record is made out of virgin plastic. So you're buying a plastic bracelet in order to tell the, industry that you don't want plastic in your water.
Right. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
So,
and people hear about this and they think, oh, okay, it helped to solve the problem, but we haven't, unfortunately.
And I want to inspire some change in our viewers. So what, and again, I always want to leave on a positive note, what little steps, living with single-use disposable plastics, it is very difficult to transition off of that, and then altering our habits can be overwhelming.
Right.
So let's just share, we are almost out of time, I can't even believe it, but let's just share some things that our viewers can do in their everyday lives to make a difference and hopefully improve your research.
Step one, right? I mean, you could have handed me a plastic bottle of water here, right? But instead you handed me a mug and we filled it with water from the sink or from a water refill station or something like that. So what I really encourage people to do is focus on one thing at a time, because when you look at the whole, as you said, single-use plastic is so prominent in our society that if you look at the whole thing, it can be terribly overwhelming. I get it. I totally get it. But so you focus on one thing at a time. You say, okay, I'm not going to take any more plastic bags when I go to the grocery store. Never. I'm not going to do it. I'm making a promise. And so you just... the next time you go to the grocery store, guess what? You're going to forget your reusable bags, just like you always do, but you don't take the plastic bags, right? And so you focus on one thing at a time. Once you're really good at bringing your reusable bags and you say, okay, no more bottled water. Then once you're good at that, you say, okay, no more straws. And you just kind of go through, you kind of start looking at your life. Just recently, I changed all of my cleaning products over to glass. And I buy, basically tablets that I dissolve in the water in order to make my cleaning supplies. I just added a subscription, so my shampoo and my conditioner come in aluminum refillable containers that I send back, and then they get filled, and then they send them back. And so I'm no longer getting plastic, shampoo and conditioner. I use Bite toothpaste. So my toothpaste are little tablets that I chew and I brush my teeth with.
Okay, that's very different. I haven't heard of that one yet.
So, once you start, you go, okay, now that I got this, I'm going to look for the next thing. Start Googling. There's amazing stuff out there to make it easy for you.
And I cannot believe it, but again, our time is coming to a close. Where can our viewers learn about what you're doing and again, start making those changes through their own research?
So I have a website, sherrymason.com or sherrymason.org. They take you to the same place. And on there is a link to Be the Change. So one of my web pages has a bunch of different products that you can go out and make use of. I have been offered no compensation. They are just simply things that I found that I really like. And so I just like to put them out there because I know that there are people that are looking to make those changes and just don't know how to make those first steps. So those gives you a place where you can go and find products, get the process started. That's always the first, right? Is the first step is always the hardest step. And then once you start going, trust me, it'll show up on your Facebook feed. Once you start buying these things.
They know. Facebook knows. So I want to thank you so much. And again, I mentioned that you are the sustainability coordinator for Penn State Barron, and there is a great website for that too. So I want to thank you so much for being on the show today and really just starting this conversation that we're going to have about microplastics.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Viewers, again, I want you to take this time, research your personal care products, and just take baby steps at a time, phasing out some of that single-use plastic that you may use every day in your lives. I know it's going to be difficult, but future generations will definitely appreciate all the hard work you're putting in now. I want to thank you for tuning into the Millcreek Government Channel, and until next time, have a great day.